Everybody, this is Bonnie Vandermeulen, Training Coordinator for Wisconsin Facets. On behalf of our entire Wisconsin Facets staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Our webinar today is entitled Transition Planning Application. Our presenters for today are Nancy Molfender and Brenda Swoboda. Nancy has been working in the field of disability services for more than 25 years and strives to support inclusive outcomes for all people. She earned a master's degree in special education from Northeastern University and a PhD from the University of Wisconsin in special education and rehab psychology. Nancy has been employed as a special educator, a transition coordinator, and administrator for both employment and home support agencies. She also worked as a project consultant for the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities with the Let's Get to Work and Employment First statewide projects. Nancy now serves as the Educational Consultant and Transition Improvement Grant Director at the Department of Public Instruction. In addition, Nancy teaches courses in the UW system. Brenda Swoboda is the West Regional Transition Coordinator and supports CESA 4, 10, and 11 under the new Transition Improvement Grant. She graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Stout with a degree in vocational rehabilitation with a concentration in independent living. She then received her master's degree in education at UW-Stout as well as in the area of cognitive disabilities teaching. And she has a cognitive disabilities teaching license for grades 7 through 12. Prior to coming to TIG, she taught special education for 17 years and was a transition coordinator for 6 of those years. Brenda is passionate about transition for our students with disabilities and believes in thinking outside the box when creating transition plans. Her office is located in CESA 4 in West Salem, Wisconsin. It is my great pleasure today to introduce to you both Nancy and Brenda, and thank you, ladies, for your participation.
You're very welcome. It's fabulous to have all of you with us today. I'm Nancy Molfender.
I'm Brenda Swoboda.
And I just want to let all of you know that Brenda and I, thanks to the wonders of technology, Brenda and I are co-presenting, but we're in different places. So if at any point during our presentation you wonder how come we didn't know something was going on with the other one, that's why. We're actually not in the same place. And what I'm planning to do is I'm going to start with foundations of transition planning for just a few minutes before we launch into the app, just so that if there are some of you on the webinar with us today who aren't fully aware of what the transition planning requirements are, we want to give you that basis, because we designed the app to meet the requirements in a very student and family friendly way. And so what I have on the title of this slide to start us off is that before we talk about the app, we're going to start with IDEA on transition. And I'm guessing that the majority of you know that IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, but it is the federal legislation that mandates most of our special education requirements. So we have to, in Wisconsin, and all other states have to adhere to all of the requirements in IDEA, and then a couple of other laws impact transition services as well, but this is our main special education federal law. So the overall purpose of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is to ensure that all students with disabilities have a free and appropriate public education. And one of the things that's emphasized is that students will be prepared to go on to further education and job training and employment and independent living. So that is stressed in IDEA. And so one of the things that we promote at the Department of Public Instruction and also through our Transition Improvement Grant is that elementary, middle, and high school programs need to be working on that. So conversations about where a student wants to go in the future really should start in elementary school so that expectations get laid and so that students and their families can start thinking about what's going to be in the future. And for the formal transition planning that I'm going to speak to through the rest of my part of the presentation, formal transition planning with an actual written plan in Wisconsin needs to start by the time a student is 14. So what that means is that the first IEP meeting that that student has when they're 14 years of age, the transition plan should be put in place, so that the team and the student can begin working on the steps toward the outcomes that that student and family want to see. Something else that's coming very soon to a school near you is academic career planning. Some schools in Wisconsin have already implemented academic career planning. Others will need to do so per state requirements beginning next fall, starting in the school year 2017-18, and that academic career planning process needs to be in place for all students, including students with disabilities, when they begin 6th grade. So if you are working in a district now, or you're a family member of a student in a district and you haven't heard of academic career planning, next year you will hear about it, because it will be part of the process for all students starting in 6th grade. So then the next question on all of our minds is, specifically, what does IDEA say has to be part of the transition plan and transition services? So IDEA says, and I love that it starts this way, that it needs to be part of a results-oriented process. And so really thinking about what's the goal for after school and how are we going to support kids to get there. And it needs to include both an academic component as well as functional. So what does the student need in coursework to get the kind of job that they want after school, to get to the kind of education that they want to have, whether that's vocational or whether it's 4-year, 2-year, post-secondary education? What do they need to take for courses in high school, but also what do they need to know? What kinds of habits and skills do they need to develop in terms of, being a good college student or a good employee, a good community member? So we want to help kids work toward independence in all of those areas of their lives. The other thing that IDEA tells us, and tells us in education and schools and teachers, is that activities around the transition plan and transition services need to be coordinated with each other, so that our transition plan and the required components of it include thinking about what the classes are that the student is taking now and will take between that point in time and graduation. What are the related services that they need to be successful? So does a student need to have occupational therapy and assistive technology support? Does the student need to have extra time or extra types of materials provided in different ways with modifications and accommodations? What types of community experiences are going to help the student and the family decide on what's going to be next after high school? Experiential learning is also emphasized in academic career planning, so it's really nice to see the transition requirements for students with disabilities coming together with some new requirements for all students, because we really feel like this is going to help support educators in school buildings to all be working toward the same goal for all students. So we're really thinking, one of my colleagues on the academic career planning team at DPI, when she presents, she tells people that academic career planning is a transition plan for everyone. And she actually says ACP is PTP for everyone. So it's really exciting to hear that. And the other thing is that IDEA stresses that schools and educational services need to support post-school adult living objectives as well. So in our transition plans and programming, we think about school and work, academic and employment outcomes, but also daily living skills. So it's another requirement in IDEA. Now, IDEA tells us, this is written right in the law, that these coordinated activities must be based on the student's needs and take into account her or his strengths, preferences, and interests. And so it doesn't say strengths or preferences or interests, it says all three of those things. What are those students' strengths, and what do they prefer, and what are they interested in? So trying to really stress bringing all of those pieces together. So in Wisconsin, what all this means, and I have this slide included because I like for people to know that in other states, the federal requirement is actually that transition planning starts at 16. And so in Wisconsin, we have made that requirement earlier. This is the Wisconsin statute, as you can see on your screen. And we've done that because research truly supports the earlier a student and their family have a chance to begin thinking about the process, then typically the better the outcomes are. And so I like people to know the distinction that you may see in federal requirements, or you may see other pieces of literature that say transition planning formally has to begin at 16. So I really like to share that in Wisconsin we've backed it up to age 14, so that if you see a distinction there, that's why. And so we have an online transition plan that we're going to talk about a little bit more in a minute that includes the requirements from IDEA and is also Wisconsin specific. So our planning that we have, our planning application, which is the post-secondary transition plan, or PTP, has to comply with both the federal regulations and also our state statute. And when we talk about transition planning, we really talk about it as serving as a roadmap, which means that a student at 14 creates a plan, and if that plan doesn't change at all between 14 and 18, 19, 20, or 21, we're pretty surprised. Because like all good roadmaps, as you're navigating your trip, you figure out different places you want to see or different things you want to try, maybe have different goals for yourself, especially a roadmap that's intended to be over a period of years. And it has to include some good evaluation, transition assessment, both on the academic side and on the functional side, that can support the student to achieve their post-school goals and keep making progress. And so there it is. We call it, very, very lovingly, we call it the PTP, but we use a lot of acronyms in education, so I like to share with people that the full verbiage for that is the post-secondary transition plan, and it does meet the federal requirements as well, the components that we have contained. And so what are those specific components? Well, the first thing we like to share with people is that it is a legal part of the individual education program. So because we use an online application in Wisconsin for the transition plan, sometimes teachers and students and family members think that the transition plan is separate, but it really is part of the IEP. So anytime that a student has an IEP meeting and they have a transition plan as part of that because they're 14 or older, when the student and family get their copy from the school, the PTP or transition plan should be included because it's a legal part of the document. Students starting at age 14 have to be invited to their meeting, and so the student themselves can decline to come, but if the student doesn't wish to be part of the actual meeting, which we hope that most or all do, but if they don't, then the IEP team is directed that they really need to have a conversation with the student and get their input. So bear that in mind when we talk about the app, when Brenda talks about the actual app and how that could be part of the pre-meeting conversation with students. The other thing that has to be part of the transition plan is that students must set goals for what type of education and training they want after high school. So these are post-school goals. And we still have students and family members and sometimes newer teachers who are confused about that. The transition plan must have goals for after high school. So where do I want to go to college? Or where do I want to go to get vocational training? Where do I want to get my job training? I have to start thinking about that as early as age 14. I also have to set for myself a goal for what kind of job I want to have. Again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, like any good roadmap, we expect that with experiences and information and exploration that this will change over time, but students need to start thinking about it by age 14. And then independent living is a third area that I've mentioned a couple of times that is contained in IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act right now, the 2004, which is the most recent reauthorization, has independent living goals as optional. There have been a number of listening sessions recently to give input to the next reauthorization, and many people have said, let's make that a required post-school goal as well. And so you'll see on my slide I have optional, but with a ... And for any of us who know or have worked with or love teenagers, we know that all of them really have to be thinking about how to manage their time, take care of their home, take care of themselves, take care of their finances. I happen to live with 2 teenagers, and I really, really want them to have independent living goals. So one of the things we may see in a next reauthorization is that that becomes a required post-school goal. So these post-school goals are required to be based on outcomes of age-appropriate transition assessments. One of the ways that we support teachers and students and families to have access to transition assessments in Wisconsin is that we have a guide that was developed through the Transition Improvement Grant. So Brenda's going to show you that website in a little while, and our transition assessment guide is there, and it lists transition assessments that are available by topic. So a topic for a transition assessment that's selected for a student should really be based on what we talked about first thing in the presentation, which is those strengths and interests of the student, and also where, as a team, where we know their needs are. And so that's something that we really encourage schools and teachers to think about, a variety of assessments, and not just using the same one for all students, but figuring out what's really best for that individual student. And then based on what grade the student is in and what they need to finish in terms of requirements for graduation, a course of study is developed. Our online transition plan requires putting in 1 year of coursework at a time. We always recommend go ahead and fill the whole thing in, and you can go back and revise it. But when we think about that word of a roadmap, the transition plan being a roadmap, it's much easier to meet a goal for any of us if we have the benchmarks laid out before us. And so if a student knows that they need to take English 1 before they can take English 2, or algebra before they take geometry, and they have a goal to go to technical college or a four-year college, they need to know what they have to complete. And so we want to give students clear information, and their families clear information about what they're going to need to do to achieve that diploma or graduation, so that they can move on to the next steps after they leave high school. The transition plan also is required to list transition services. So for those of you who have been to any trainings or participated in any kinds of professional development or webinars about the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, you probably heard that that's another one of the federal laws that impacts transition planning, and that outlined 5 specific categories for what the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act calls pre-employment transition services. And so the transition services that are now available in a drop-down menu in our PTP, or post-secondary transition plan, align with that other federal law, WIOA. We actually have 6 categories because we broke one of them down into home and community services for independent living. And so any student, family member, or teacher can find a list of those services, and we recommend that the whole team looks at the services ahead of time, and you'll see in the app that those are also reflected there. And I will tell you, it's been amazing to me. I've had a number of teachers who have worked with the app with students, and I have heard multiple times from teachers that they were so surprised that students selected multiple transition services that they felt they needed when they went through the app. So that has been fantastic to see. Because the post-secondary transition plan per IDEA only requires that you select one, but we know that virtually all students are getting more than one transition service. So we strongly suggest that you try to capture all of the things that you're providing if you're a teacher or school, and if you're a family member or student, select all the things that you think you need, because we really want that to be documented and captured. In next year's version of the post-secondary transition plan, teams are going to have to verify that the services selected for the prior year were actually provided. And so documenting what's happening is a really good idea. And then, of course, as part of the IEP, students have annual goals, and at least one of those has to be connected to the post-school goals. I find, and I think most of us find, that when we look at transition plans and IEP, the IEP as a whole, and then that transition plan portion, that the annual goals should be very much connected to helping the student graduate and move on to what they want to do next. So that connection is typically there, but it's something we ask students and teachers to check. So just in case you haven't seen this, this is an agenda that's heavily promoted through DPI and very much connected to transition planning and academic career planning, which is that our goal in education is that all students leave high school, college, and career ready, meaning that they're not just academically prepared, but also socially and emotionally prepared. And so this is just a visual of what we're talking about, that at the center of transition planning should be the student's life goals, and then surrounding that are the pieces we just discussed: assessment, their classes, transition services, and the annual goals that help move them toward what they want in the end. So what I would like to do at this point, so that is our foundation of transition planning requirements. I'd like to stop for just a moment to see if anybody has any questions before we move into the application itself.
Oh, I do have a couple of questions for you, Nancy. One was, how widely is this information disseminated to middle and high school case managers?
That's a great question. We, through the Department of Public Instruction and through our connections with institutes of higher education that train teachers, and through our Transition Improvement Grant, we have presentations all over the state on a monthly basis, I would say even almost a weekly basis. And so we try very hard to disseminate the information through a variety of avenues. We are always open to additional avenues. Brenda, I want to see if you have anything you would like to add to that.
No, I think you covered it, and I do think we're a team of 10 for the Transition Improvement Grant, and I think we're either in districts doing one-on-one district trainings, working with teachers, sometimes youth, which is really exciting with the app this year, doing a lot of family outreach this year. And but again, like Nancy said, if you had any suggestions or if you see a need somewhere, definitely reach out to us. You can contact any of us through the TIG site, because that's something that we want to know. If there are needs that we can meet, we definitely want to get out there and get the good transition word out.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and then I have a question that was written. When was this particular statute set into place? I think it has to do with all the transition and as it relates to IDEA.
Sure. So the vast majority of what I just talked about in terms of requirements were put into place in IDEA in 1997, so 20 years ago. And I'm sure you can tell from the tone of my voice the frustration. I've been working in transition for a long time, and so the fact that there are still there's still a gap sometimes between what should be happening and what is happening after 20 years is somewhat frustrating to me, but that's why I do what I do and keep working at it every day along with Brenda and the rest of my colleagues. There were a couple of changes in 2004, but they were fairly minor. But one of the things that happened in 2004 is what we're going to go into next, which is that family engagement in the process and student self-determination were strengthened in 2004, but most of the requirements began in 1997. And then in terms of Wisconsin requiring transition plans to be in place starting at age 14, that happened about 10 years ago. So Wisconsin was fairly progressive in that way by saying, hey, we know the federal requirement is 16, but when people in transition started looking at the research, it was clear that earlier, if students can get started before they go to high school or as soon as they get to high school, that's really helpful.
And there is another question, but I don't know if you want to wait to take this one or not. You guys make the decision. It says, where has this app been deployed in beta format and how widely was it tested?
Sure. We can take that now, and we might think of more afterward, but it was the state of Kansas had a transition planning app for about 2 years before we approached the developer to help us put one together for Wisconsin. And so it was fairly widely tested for a year before that. But I don't know if I can speak specifically to how widely. We would probably have to check with our developer. Brenda, I don't know if you heard from our developer any more specifics than that.
No. Mm-mm.
Was that the last question for the moment, Bonnie?
It is. Thank you.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. So one of the things that we know from extended research is that students being very integrally involved in their transition planning process is important. Shouldn't be any surprise to any of us. And so we want to promote everyone working really hard to engage students, because we can all set goals for someone else, but that doesn't mean that someone else wants to work toward those exact goals. And so we know that it's really important to have students be as involved in developing their plan as possible and the steps to achieving their goals, being self-directed and self-determined. But the other thing that many years of research have shown us is that family engagement in the process is extremely critical. Again, it shouldn't be a surprise, because while as educators we know we see kids every day at our school, they come to us 9 to 10 months a year, most days of the week, students do graduate from high school at some point, which is a really good thing, and families are forever. And so we know that for bumps along the road that happen after a student leaves high school, the more engaged the family was in the process with the student, the better the outcomes for employment and post-secondary education will be. We also really want to, as I mentioned earlier, encourage school teams and students and families to look at a variety of assessment data to help determine what the goals will be and what the needs are for services, and both academically and for functional and community skills. And we also really want effective services that are going to address education as well as employment. And that does include services for community and work experiences and exploration as well.
Hold on.
So this led us, our team here in Wisconsin and the Transition Improvement Grant staff are really phenomenal about this, always thinking about how do we promote self-determination and engagement of students and families in the process. And so as I turn it over to Brenda, I will just share that this app from Kansas, one of our Transition Improvement Grant coordinators, Lene, saw a colleague of hers shared a presentation with her about the app from Kansas. And she came to me and said, we got to do this. We got to do this. And if any of you know Lene or ever meet her, you will know that she is extremely enthusiastic in all ways. But she said, we just got to do this. And the rest of us agreed with her. And so we need to support self-determination in any ways we can. This is another way we do it.
Okay, so Nancy, I'll take it from here.
You're on. Yep. Thanks, Brenda.
Okay, so just to give you guys a little bit background, so what I'm going to do. So we're going to actually go to the online platform. Right now it's just web-based. We will have the app shortly, hopefully sooner than later, in iTunes and Google Play, and we will let everybody know when it comes out there also. So today we're actually going to go into the app and go page by page. I won't spend a ton of time on each page because then at the end I also want to take you to our Transition Improvement Grant website. Part of this process, that what we learned as we did this was one size does not fit all, as it never does in our world, correct? So one of the things that came out of this, we've had youth of all different disabilities pilot the app for us. We've had family members, we've had teachers, we've had service providers take a look at the app and give us feedback. And based on some of that feedback, they really have created some good tools that support the app. So at the end, I will take you to our website and then show you some of those supporting documents that were created based off of user feedback. So right now we're going to kind of dive into the app, which is so exciting for me. So again, I think Nancy covered a lot of this. The app, we worked with Kansas. We have to give them props because they were a huge help for us to be able to roll this out in Wisconsin. And again, the app was designed to be a little bit more user-friendly. The PTP can be very technical. As we know, it has a lot of terms in there that are teacher-driven. So we wanted something to give to youth that they're able to kind of have a voice at the table and bring their ideas to the table in a different way. The same for youth as families too. This is definitely a tool that families can use to do prior to an IEP meeting, share with the teacher, and it's kind of nice, the feedback that we're getting, it's really kind of nice to look at everybody's plans and what their vision is, compare it, and then that really drives some really effective transition planning. So we are going to go out, and feel free, one of the reasons that we wanted you guys to be able to be on a device or your computer was to follow along, but also if you wanted to go out to the app and follow along yourself as we go. So you can watch it visually on the screen, or if you have a smartphone with you, you're able to put it on there and kind of follow along there also. So a couple housekeeping things with the app. So this again is the online version, and right when you get into the app, there are instructions with how to complete the app. So it just kind of walks you through. We're saying there are more than 15 questions. It's actually 15 pages, but it just kind of gives you that visual of what to do, that here's the next button when you're ready to move on. If you change your mind, that you can go back into the app and decide later, like, oh, you know what, I decided I want to go back and add another transition service for employment. Or I want to add 2 different careers because I'm not really sure what I want to do, which, like Nancy said earlier, is very common for youth. At the end of the app, there is an option to have a draft. It comes out as a PDF. In the draft, you can email it to yourself, you can email it to a teacher, you can email it to a school counselor, you can email it to your family, just so everybody kind of has a vision of where that youth is headed. And then at the end, we do ask just for a little bit of input. We ask for, it really isn't as much as a survey as we ask people to put in their zip code just so we can kind of see who's using the app and where. The other thing before we get into starting the PTP, the youth PTP, are the frequently asked questions. So if you open the frequently asked questions, here are all of the questions. So again, you know, who's the app for? What is a PTP? All of those questions that if you're not familiar with the terminology post-secondary transition plan, PTP, or just transition planning in general, this will direct you into the right answer. So I'm gonna make sure I can go back. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna jump right into kind of the planning part of the app, which is very exciting. And in my job, I've been pretty fortunate to be able to sit down with some youth and watch them go through this process. And I can't tell you how exciting it is for me to see them get excited just to have a voice in a different way. So one of the things that we did, it really does align with the PTP. The report at the end that's a narrative will look very similar and have a very similar flow as the PTP that's in the IEP. But on here, the sequence is just a little bit different. So we start off kind of what Nancy talked about earlier, those requirements. You know, what do I want to do after high school? Most students will say, hey, I want to get a job, but I also might need a little additional training. Definitely want that job. I'm thinking about maybe going to college, so that's where they would click more education. And most kids want to, live on their own at some point. So they can pick one option here, or they can pick all three. Again, this is just for them to have some choices. And then we'll go to the next button. And Nancy, jump in anytime too if there's any requirements that I'm missing that we have to touch on. One of the questions that we asked, like Nancy said earlier, it's and for us to get some information on, we want students to have a little bit of an understanding about why they're starting to do this. So in Wisconsin, obviously, students have to start, they have to have a PTP on file by the time they're 14. So for some of our students, that's the year they're 13, turning 14. So we're just asking them, are they 13, 14, or 15? And then if you are a student that wants to learn a little bit more about why I'm asking that question, the app brings up a little bit of a description, telling students that, hey, in Wisconsin, when you're 14, it's the law that says we have to have this PTP developed. And we're hoping that some students get excited that this is really something, like the description says, it's really going to help move you into your adult life, and it's really going to help you reach your goals. And if they choose 16 or older, it also addresses the fact that students have to be informed on how their rights will change. So if they're 17 or 16 or 17 and during the duration of that IEP they're going to be turning 18, it's a really great way to open up the discussion about how those rights will change. And then students can pick what grade they are in. So today I'm just going to kind of pick, we'll start with 10th grade. And all of this then will be fed into the report at the end. So the other thing that we wanted to start talking about, one of the things with self-determination is really understanding who you are, if you have a disability, and opening that door for students to know, do I have an IEP? Especially if students are going on to post-secondary education. A lot of students come to their meeting and they participate in their meeting, but they're not really sure, that they're not up to date with the lingo. Like IEP, they know they have a meeting. So this is, again, just kind of more of that informative. If a student picks yes, it gives a brief description about what the IEP is. But if they pick no, or if they pick not sure, it's just saying, you know what, that's okay. Here's a tool that's going to help you participate. And then we also touch a little bit here on, this is definitely something that can be used for students who have 504 plans, or can be used to inform for academic and career plans. So if you have a student that does not have a disability, and in Wisconsin, but wants to do some kind of formal written plan of their own, this app is definitely applicable. There are certain parts that will have some disability-related terminology that may not apply to students, but it's definitely something that all students can use. So page 4, we want students to come to their IEP meetings. And again, like Nancy said earlier, they're required to be invited, but not all students want to attend. So this was just a little plug for us to be able to say, are you coming to your meetings? These are important. So if students pick yes, it's good. This app will produce a written document. But if you're picking no, it's just like, okay, it's your right to attend and speak out at your meetings. I'm really trying to pull those students back into the process. As a teacher, former teacher, looking back, sometimes I talk too much. I forgot to really make sure that student had time at those meetings to feel like they had something to say at the table. Once we started doing self-directed IEP meetings, it really changed student engagement, and that's what we're hoping this app can do. And not just student engagement, but family engagement too. And then again, that not sure, just reaffirming that, yep, you need to come to those meetings, and this is a great place for you to have your voice heard. So now we kind of start to dig into those questions of employment, education and training, independent living. So one of the first questions that we start off, what's our end goal? What kind of job do you want after high school? So a student right here could write in 1, so I'm just going to write in chef. I actually had a youth event last night where I talked to some students, and one young man said he wants to be a cook and a video game designer. So in the app, they could write here as many things as they wanted. So they could write chef and video game designer. Now I get to check my spelling here. So it's just to start to get students thinking about the job that they want to have. In the app will ask the question a few different ways, as you'll see here in a minute. So then we want students to have some input. So what classes? We know that students that have an interest in classes or have a strength in certain classes, that's a direct correlation to maybe some future employment goals. So we want to give them a voice with what classes are you currently good at or that you like to take. And again, they can pick as many as they want here. And then, so let's say we've got English. Obviously, if they want to be a chef, they probably like foods. But if they want to be a video game designer, they probably like their technology classes too. And then we also included, any of you that write a PTP know there's this dreaded other category as far as what not to use when you're the teacher writing it. But we included other in the youth app just so students can always add, if something's not there or they don't think it reflects it, we wanted them to be able to have the opportunity to get a little bit more individualized. And so somebody else might write down that, you know, they might have a class that their school provides that other schools don't. And I'm trying to think one of the, like culinary 2. Culinary 1 and 2 could be in there. I'm just kind of, so that's where they could really have their voice be heard too. The next question, I'm interested in information for the following career clusters. So with this is one of those opportunities, kind of those teachable moment opportunities for teachers or family members that want to learn more about career clusters. With academic and career planning, not every student has even heard the term career cluster. In Wisconsin, with academic and career planning and the tool Career Cruising, more and more students and families also will start to recognize what those career clusters are. However, one of the suggestions that we have on the tip sheet that I'll show you later is this might be a great opportunity for some pre-teaching. On the DPI website, as well as through our Indicator 13 website on DPI, there is kind of a one-pager of some career clusters, so you could print that ahead of time, and you could have that, you know, sitting next to students as they're doing this. So they have a little bit of an idea of if I choose agriculture and food because I want to be a chef, what are some of those career, what are those pathways and careers that fall under that cluster? So there's some great supporting documents out there that I'll show you, like I said, at the end. And then again, we kind of start getting into the, you know, after high school, I want to work full-time or part-time. Some students may not know. One of the things that we, if they chose full-time, that we wanted them, again, full-time in the area of, because some of the students, there may be a little bit of confusion with, okay, I want a job in high school, but after high school, I want to work full-time. So if the student wrote chef and video game designer, like I used as the examples, right here they could say, you know, by the time I graduate post-secondary, I want to work full-time. I want to be designing. So that's where they can put that voice in there. Do you have concerns about working full-time? One of the things that we wanted students to be able to be engaged in the discussion of, and to really bring that discussion to the table, was a little bit of kind of twofold. A little bit of that myth busting that we do as families and educators, that, you know, if students are thinking that they can't work because they're receiving benefits and they're worried that they're not able to get a job, or if they think they may have a physical disability and they think, well, I'm not sure if I can work full time. We really wanted this to open the door so that IEP team could have a real honest discussion about what do we need to provide, what questions do we need to have answered to find out if you have concerns working full time. What are some of the steps the IEP team can take to make sure that we help you reach your goals? And again, if they don't answer that one, some of the questions in the app are required, many are not. So if they decide to skip that one, that would be okay too. And then right at the end on the last part of the page are skills that I'm good at. So if there's anything else that they want to speak to. So maybe students that are really early in their planning aren't really sure about the kind of careers that are out there or what they want to do. And they're really at the point of really discussing, like Nancy said earlier, strengths, preferences, and interests. So this is a great place to pull in that strength discussion. I had a young man last night at the event say to me, I don't like to talk to people, but if I can sit on the other end of the computer and provide, he loves the chat boxes. Like, he thought it would be a great job to be kind of a Q&A. Now when you log into, like, I know for me when I go into a car dealership, somebody's always there to answer your questions. So I thought, what a great way for him to start thinking about, I don't have to see people face to face, but I'm pulling on my strengths. And I was so impressed. And he was a 9th grader, so I thought that was, so one of the things that we talked about was maybe he's not social, but he likes to be helpful. So that's where students can really, and sometimes for students it's hard. It's hard for us to say our strengths. So if they're sitting with a teacher, if they're sitting with a family member, one parent that I worked with said, I want his siblings, I want my son's siblings to do this app and for all of us to compare this. And I thought that was a pretty brilliant idea too. So this is just a great way to start talking about those strengths that Nancy referred to earlier. Okay, so we'll go on to page 6. I'm watching time here too, so I'm going to probably go a little bit quicker. I don't want to keep you guys too late. Now we dive into, for those of you that have written a PTP, this will look very familiar. These are the terms taken right out of the post-secondary transition plan application that align with education and job training. So students can talk about they would like to go on to a 2-year technical college, a 4-year. They might want to just go right into the workforce and receive that on-the-job training. And we did put in here as an option here if students chose 2-year college. If they know where they want to go, they can put those details there. And then on the bottom, it's just the fields of study. What are the things that you want to study? Again, if you're not sure, it's okay to say, you can write in this box, I don't know. You could write in, I'm thinking of, whatever they want to put there is, that's again, that sometimes a discussion starter at the IEP meeting. So now, one of the things Nancy talked about earlier, so because of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, those transition services are now called pre-employment transition services. So just to give you guys a little bit of a heads up, in the app, what we did is we took the list that the pre-employment transition services that are listed in the PTP, and we summarized them for a few reasons, because lengthen an app, you can't have too many words, but just to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So if students click and choose options here, this will go directly into the narrative or the report at the end, and they're actually listed as the pre-employment transition service. So here's where they talk about my future education or job training. A student might say, again, as I said earlier, they're not sure what school they want to go on, so they want to start to do some college tours. And you guys can go through and kind of read all of these. I'm going to have to speed up a little bit here. And then we start to talk about those accommodations and our modifications. So hopefully students will recognize some of these accommodations or modifications that they're currently receiving. If not, that's okay too. They can just choose to go on. But let's say we have a student right now that has extended time, but also has notes prior to class or a note taker in class. So this is just a really great way to talk about at that IEP meeting. What are the accommodations that you're currently getting, and how can those follow you to post-secondary education or employment? And then is there anything that we're missing? And there again is that other, just in case students are unfamiliar or have a unique modification or accommodation they want to make sure is addressed. Due to my disability, we wanted students to talk about, you know, do they think they'll need some success or help on the job to be successful? And if they choose yes, there's some options here for on-the-job accommodations. If they're not sure, that's okay too. Again, these are a lot of those discussion starters. So maybe a student is thinking, I want a job and I want to work, and the parents are hoping that they're going to be able to get some on-the-job support through a job coach. So they can put that there. So these, again, are some of those pre-employment transition services now specifically for work. So what areas might you need assistance with to best prepare you for employment? and students can go through and choose any of the options here. They can choose 1 or they could choose 10. It really should be individual and based on that student. So for this, I'm going to scroll just to the bottom so you can see a few of them, and I'm just going to click 1 and move on just in the sake of time. We also want a discussion about, okay, am I currently in high school and do I want a high school work experience? Because then we know some students, if they will need assistance with that, will want to be connected to DVR, and some won't. But so if students want to pursue employment, this is a great way for them to start that discussion. Yes, no, I'm not sure. If they choose yes, they can type in the type of job they think they want. And then we talk about, do you currently have a job? And again, it may be paid, it may be unpaid. It's just that discussion about having students start to document what they're doing. It gives a section for where they work, what they do, and if they have anything else, I tell students all the time, work experience goes back to if you're helping your neighbor when you're 10 years old, make sure that you write all of that stuff down, because those things that you like to do really can help drive that transition plan. So after high school, I want to, again, this is going to now start addressing that independent living goal. I agree with Nancy. I think all of our students need independent living goals. But if a student wants to move out on their own or live in a dorm and might need some assistance, this is a great way to find out, okay, what do they really want to do and how can we help planning for that in high school to best support them reaching that goal. A young man last night told me he wants to build his own house while he's in high school during one of his classes, so I thought that was pretty creative. And then we gave a section, is there anything else here you want to add? This is a great place for students to put questions. It's a great place for students to, add information about the independent living goal ahead. What questions might you have about moving out on your own? And then we go into, again, those pre-employment transition services, and having students talk about, okay, if I want to be independent and I want to, how can I be the most successful in my homework community? So there's quite a long list here. And just to quickly mention, one thing that I didn't mention at the beginning, we do have a paper application of the app. So if you want to do pre-teaching with students, or some kids really like that paper sitting next to them, they can go through and really spend time looking at this too and deciding ahead of time. So in this case, we are going to have a student that wants to learn a little bit more about, standing up for him or herself. And then again, the what am I good at? Again, sometimes harder for students to talk about what they're good at, but specifically for living on their own. What do they do? What do they want to learn more about would be a great thing to put there. So now we get to the end, and again, this is the end of the app, but actually on the narrative part, this is what they'll see at the beginning. So we want students to talk to, most students when they come to their IEP, it is a little bit difficult to talk. So we wanted to give them something to kind of break the ice. Here's who I am. Here are some of the clubs I've been involved at. If I'm volunteering, my hobbies, I think hobbies are important. Am I involved at school? And if I'm not involved at school, what do I want to learn more about? How do I get more involved in my school? So this is a place for them to just kind of give a little Q&A about themselves to introduce themselves at their IEP meeting. And then this is some of that data, that documentation that we gather that I referenced a little bit earlier. So the student's name, I'm just going to type in my name and my zip code. And then your school district, you can type in, we're going to go to ABC School. So this is where we referenced earlier that you can put in your email, send it to your family, send it to your teacher. You have the option to download a copy, but then you can also right away look at a preview. So students can go in or with their teacher, with their parents and go, okay, is this really what I want my plan to say? If not, this is a great place to go back and make some of those changes, as you can see here. So they can go into the preview and you can see a little bit here about what that report looks like. So again, it starts out a little bit about me. And I love that it starts off with those 3 measurable post-secondary goals that are in the PTP. Here's what I want to do for education training, employment, independent living. and then goes into the transition assessments. This was autofills into the report just because most students don't know what transition assessments were done, but we wanted it as a discussion or a starter at the IEP. So what was done for the transition assessment? And do we still have questions? Because if we have questions, then we might need to do more. So I will click download here. And while this is downloading, I'm just going to stop and take any questions. And then I'll take a couple minutes to take you out to the TIG site to show those supplementary materials that we created too.
One question, is this active now and how can we access it?
Yes, so the online platform, the www.witransition.com, and it is also, the link is in the PowerPoint that we have uploaded into the webinar. You can use this as much as you want. We encourage it. Use it a few times. Share it with everybody you know. Share it with your neighbors. And as soon as we get the iTunes and Google Play, we'll also put out an e-blast through our grant to let everybody know.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now.
For questions? Okay, so just quickly, here is what students will see then. So we have an introductory cover page then to the app, kind of like a, okay, now that I've done this, what do I do with it? So some of us like to have checklists, some of us like bullet points. So it's just kind of helps walk students and families and teachers, through. Now, what do I do with it? Make sure it's complete. Print and sign it at the end, share it with your family, make sure your IEP meeting is scheduled, invite the people that you want there. Anything we can do to give kids kind of a pass to be more active in their IEP, we want this app to help do that. And then there's some tips on the right, how to make their team meeting work as successful as they can. And then here will be the report. We realize, again, that one size fits all. Some of the feedback that we've gotten, I worked with a young lady up north who completed the app for us, and she really didn't want to go ahead and read a narrative. So she and her teacher went ahead and just did some highlighted some bullet points. So that's what she took to the meeting to share off the narrative. And that will look differently for every student. It's really their comfort level. And so again, it then starts to break out. And all of the questions that we answered are now in here.
And so one of the app cover page that Bonnie shared with all of you, that's one of the documents you have, and it's actually a version that has the app web address at the top because we added that, realizing that people were going to be looking for it. And then you also have an example of a report from a student who actually completed it for us and gave us permission to share.
Yeah. So I jumped over to the TIG our TIG website. It's WITIG.org. And under TIG projects, you will find the Wisconsin Transition app. And that is where you will find those supporting documents that I talked about earlier. One of the things that was created, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit down here. Some students don't want to do any kind of narrative at their meeting. So we did a sample PowerPoint. We realized that students are way more creative than I would ever be. So this link will take them to a sample PowerPoint where they could take information from that narrative and plug it into a PowerPoint. And a student could bring that to their IEP and do a visual presentation versus sitting at the table and doing a narrative. So people are free to use this. We wanted to make everything accessible by download. So if you want to edit it and create it and make it your own, absolutely encourage. We want this to be very student specific. A couple things that I want to point out. Again, we got to this under TIG projects, Wisconsin Transition app. So the how to use the Wisconsin app was the cover page. We also created a tip sheet. So if you're new to the app or if you're a teacher that's thinking about how you want to use it in your class or some suggestions for family members, we just were taking all the people that piloted the app for us. We took a lot of their feedback and put it on a tip sheet. So this may change as we go. One of the things that I wanted to mention quickly, I know we're getting down to a couple minutes here. So like I said earlier, some suggestions for the classroom. One of the things teachers might want to do is some pre-teaching with vocabulary, introduction, also the introduction to the career clusters and pathways document that I talked about. some suggestions for family members. Again, we want families to have a voice in a different way. A lot of teachers will send out transition surveys, and families like to bring that to the meeting also, but this is a way to really kind of dig into what a PTP is. One thing under the miscellaneous section, we have been experimenting a little bit with, I have used Read and Write, which is a Google app, an extension app, and it will read the app out loud to students. There's another one out there that somebody just recommended. It's called Snap and Read. I have not seen it with a student yet, but one of the assistive tech people that I work with said it's great because it will also simplify language. So there are so many great technology apps out there for students to also have the app read to them. Then the other thing, like Nancy mentioned earlier, oh, here's the sample PowerPoint, and then I talked about the paper application. So this is the app just in a kind of a worksheet format. And then the other thing I want to mention, two things quickly, we did put together a Google community. So we want people to share suggestions, ideas, how are you using this? So please, if you decide to go and join our community, use the app and give us some feedback. And if you are not familiar with Google Community, I don't believe you have to have Gmail to log into a community. And then the last thing was a postcard that was created that if a district wants to send it home with IEP meetings and share it with families, hey, there's this app out here, we really want you to use it. We created a postcard that could be sent out with the IEP invite. So I know I went really, really fast at the end, just with time, and I see we're at 1 o'clock now. So any last minute questions?
No, but I have a couple of people that thank you very much, both of you, for your participation today because they said it was wonderfully helpful.
Oh, that makes sense.
Good.
Makes
Yay.
it feel good.
We hope, yes, well, we really hope that people enjoy using the app and find it helpful in participating in their transition planning.
Yep. And both of our contact information is at the end of the PowerPoint. So we really mean it when we say contact us and give us suggestions and ideas and feedback, how it's going.
Well, thank you both so very much to Nancy and Brenda for a wonderfully informative presentation today. This concludes our webinar. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Wisconsin Facets has over 100 scheduled trainings and webinars for 2017, and please feel free to check our website and register for any upcoming trainings that you think you'd like to participate in. Also, please watch for the short evaluation coming to you after the webinar is completed. Have a good rest of your day, and again, thank you, Nancy and Brenda.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Day.